Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of RC Retirement, where we talk about the benefits you are earning on a daily basis, but we do it in simple English. Today we're going to finish out the talk on officer retention boards. I stopped midway through that last time, and today I'm going to finish up that topic, and then we can move on to something bigger and better and more fun. Or if any of this is fun, well, it is for me anyway. All right, so let us continue with officer retention boards. I'm going to continue right where I left off last time. So if you have not seen part 1, I do recommend that you go back and listen to or watch that now, depending on which format you're consuming. So if you haven't heard part 1 yet, please go back, listen to that, and then come back here and take in part 2. So let's begin. All right, so we left off with board composition last time. And since this is a National Guard regulation, it is talking about things from that perspective. So it says, Adjutants General will appoint and convene one selection board composed of either a minimum of a 3-member panel. Let me start that over again. Adjutants General will appoint and convene one selection board composed of either a minimum of a 3-member panel or odd number member panels organized into multiple separate panels. More on that in a moment. The number of officers being considered for selective retention will determine the configuration of the boards and or panels. Board/panel members may be selected from within the state concerned, other components of the Army, from other National Guard units in other states, with the concurrence of the Adjutant General of that state, of course. Each panel will consider all applicable grades within each group simultaneously. At no time will any panel consider individual grades separately. Additionally, the following applies. The single board panel will be composed of at least 3 commissioned officers. There must be at least 1 National Guard and 1 active component officer on the board. The third board member may be from any Army component. All 3 members must be present for all sessions of the board. All provisions indicated in paragraph 2-4 apply to single panel boards or single board panels. And I'll read that paragraph in a moment since you can't really see what paragraph 2-4 is. I'm on paragraph 2-3 at the moment. So let's continue. Paragraph 2-3, bravo. The multiple odd number member board panel will be composed of a minimum of 9 commissioned officers, at least one of which must be an active component officer. All provisions indicated in this paragraph and paragraph 2-5 apply to multiple board panels. And I'll get into what all that is momentarily. All right. Service members from other military forces, Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, are not eligible to serve on these boards. All members must be of equal or higher grade and, except for the active component member, must be senior in date of rank to each officer considered. Each panel must be chaired by at least an 06 with senior date of rank. 2-3 Hotel. If an active component officer is not available, then a substitution can be made with a National Guard officer serving on Title 10 or Title 32 AGR orders. However, The Title 32 AGR officer must be senior in rank to all officers considered by the board. I know this is getting complicated, but I'm going to also have a selection of resources in the show notes so that you can see all of the things that I'm reading and pare it down yourself. And I'll also go a little deeper into each of these as we go. All right. Next subparagraph. An officer will be designated as a recorder by the appointing authority and will be without a vote. Board membership will not include the convening adjutant general, the state judge advocate general, equal opportunity officer, inspector general, chaplain, U.S. property and fiscal officer, or any officer not selected for retention by a previous board. It is recommended that neither Assistant Adjutant General Army nor the Chief of Staff be impaneled as board members. So, preferably, those officers will not be on the board either. General officers are highly encouraged to be impaneled, however, as board members in locations outside of their own individual states. Nice little touch there. Senior Army advisors may be impaneled as board members. However, this is not a requirement for the Selective Retention Board. And I'm still reading from the National Guard regulation, as you can tell. And the Senior Army Advisor actually is a good choice for a board member, since that is an active duty or an active component officer. All right, subparagraph Mike. States may solicit board members from outside of the geographical limits of their state. Seeking assistance from neighboring states, Army installations, and or the National Guard Bureau is an acceptable practice and is strongly encouraged. Requests for assistance at National Guard Bureau may be submitted to Department of the Army, DA boards, and Human Capital Management. And it gives the office symbols for those. All panels are to report results directly to the board president and then to the adjutant general. Results of each individual panel presented to the adjutant general will be combined into a single report. Okay, so that's enough reading of the board composition. Now let me go into a little bit of my own thoughts. So this regulation spends a great deal of time talking about who can be on the panel of officers on the board, who can be part of this panel. I'm actually glad for this because it forces the states or the branch of service, if we're talking Army Reserve or Navy Reserve, etc. It forces the branch of service, if they have similar standards, to carefully choose the people who will be reviewing the officers being considered by the board. They are deserving of mindful review, although, as I said earlier, sometimes some of those officers do end up being non-retained when they may not need to be, and maybe I don't know all the facts involved in the case of those officers, who knows, but it is at least a good idea to put strong consideration into who will be a part of these panels and who will be considering all of these officers up for retention consideration. All right, so let's move on. This is going to be a little dry, so bear with me. We are reading out of regulations here, so that can be a bit dull. All right, so paragraph 2-4, I mentioned that a moment ago. Operation of single panels. States with low to moderate volumes of officers may use the 3-member panel to operate the entire board process. The panel will review all files of all grades for all eligible officers in the state or territory. All files are rotated through all three members. Each panel member votes on each file. All three members must be present during all sessions of the panel. Officers who have not been recommended by the majority are withdrawn and not recommended for retention. Officers recommended for retention by all three members are recommended for retention. All right, so that is fairly simple to understand. Each member reviews each officer and makes a recommendation for retention and or non-retention, and then moves on to the next person. That's pretty simple to understand. All right, so now we go to paragraph 2-5. Operation of multiple panels. This is a little more complex, but it actually runs along the same lines. You'll see what I mean. Separate panels are authorized and may be conducted due to the high volume of officers or dispersed locations in certain states or territories. The multi-member panel process consists of two distinct phases. During phase 1, each panel operates independently from the others as separate mini-boards and considers each file. Excuse me. In phase 2, all panels are combined into a single multi-member board to concentrate on analyzing those files that require closer consideration. All right, so a little more on phase 1. Initial consideration by individual panels. Each panel operates separately. 3 separate vote sheets are used for each file. Vote sheets are not transferred between panels with files. All files are rotated through each panel. Panel members vote on each file. And finally, all 3 members must be present during all sessions of the panel. Fair enough. Phase 2. Final consideration by the combined multi-member board. Panels are combined into a single odd number member board. A minimum of 7 members, to include an active component officer, must be present at all sessions in the case of a 9-member board to establish a quorum. 2. Officers who have not been recommended by any of the separate panels from phase 1 are withdrawn from consideration and not recommended for retention. The combined board examines the remaining officers, and then officers recommended for retention by all panels are recommended for retention. All right, so enough reading on that part. Let's go into a little bit of my own very short analysis, or more of a summary, really. So this section is reserved for states with a large pool of officers and splits them up between a larger board. It then brings them all together and votes on them all, or votes on all of them. Not really all of them. It does break a few out. It's the same procedure as that, in essence, described for the 3-member panel, just set up for a larger group. It's just a way to try to manage the high number of people being considered by the retention board. So you've got to work that out somehow. All right, individual communications with boards. Officers selected for selective retention consideration are not authorized to appear before a board in person on their own behalf or representing the interest of another officer. Officers being considered for selective retention may submit memoranda to the president of the board on any matter. It is inappropriate, let me say this with air quotes here, or air emphasis, it is inappropriate for an officer to request non-selection. Unsolicited communications to include third-party communications that contain criticism or reflect on the character, conduct, or motives of any officer will not be made available to the board. That's pretty easy to understand, I think. So just like the enlisted boards, officers are allowed to write a letter to the president of the board. I personally think this is a good idea since personal appearance at the board is not allowed. And if you are an officer being considered by one of these boards, if you think there is anything in your record that may be derogatory, or there may be any reason that you may have a slim chance of not being retained, or a slim chance of being retained, rather, a letter to the board won't hurt. So consider strongly writing a letter to the president of the board. It could help you out significantly. And we will continue. Conduct of the board. This is paragraph 2-8 for those following along in the regulation. Boards will consider the potential benefit that can be expected from the continued service of each officer before the board. The board should consider the following in arriving at its decision: availability of qualified replacements, appropriate civilian and military education required for performance of duties associated with higher level command and staff assignments. 3. An officer's demonstrated performance through evaluation reports, academic reports, and results of inspections and evaluations that cite the manner of performance of the officer. 4. An officer's medical and physical fitness and the impact of same on future assignments. Now we go to subparagraph Bravo here. The board may recommend one of the following for each officer: select and be reconsidered in 2 years, select and be reconsidered in 1 year, or non-select. If the vote is not unanimous, any dissenting member may prepare a minority or dissenting report to submit to support their position. A copy of that minority report will be included or will be enclosed with each copy of the board report. Finally, before adjournment, the board will prepare a preliminary report, shown in Appendix H, which is in the show notes, indicating the number of officers and warrant officers considered by grade, gender, and racial and ethnic category. The final report will be approved by the Adjutant General and becomes an enclosure to the report of the board for selective retention. All right. So the board considers all the facts in each officer's future value to the service. This is very similar to what was shown in the enlisted boards, only in many cases the evaluation reports for these officers bears significantly more weight. I mentioned this in the first part of this series, and this just gives more weight to that statement. So if the panelists believe that an officer meets the qualifications for continued service, they will recommend 1 or 2 years of continued service for that officer. If not, then they'll recommend non-retention. Those recommendations must be unanimous. Otherwise, the dissenting voters must submit a report explaining their views. And that is pretty standard as well. If you don't have a unanimous vote, then the minority group has to state why it has this differing opinion. And it looks like I am actually going to have to break this into a part 3 because there's still a good amount of material here. And we're already about to hit the 19 or 20 minute mark, so I don't want to drag this out, and bore people with a long video. So again, let's come back, another time and finish up. There's about, I've got 7 pages of material here, and I've just finished page 4, if that gives you an indication of how much there is still to go. So we'll come back another time and finish this up. I thought we'd be able to finish today, but apparently not. So please join me next time when we will finish officer retention boards. Until that time, I do thank you for being part of this audience, for spending time with me, and for taking the time to both learn this information and, as many of you have been doing, to spread those links, to share these articles and videos with other members of the service whom you think will find this information useful. And of course, if you haven't already done so, and I always point in the wrong direction, be sure to hit the subscribe link here at the bottom corner of the video, and let's get those subscription numbers up. I'd like to be able to hit quadruple digits by sometime next year, and we have to do that one subscriber at a time, so be sure to hit that button. And of course, any comments and questions you may have, put those in either the comments section, or if you're listening on a podcast, you can send me an email at dj@rcretirement.com, and I will be sure to answer your questions. Finally, if you would like to support my work, you can go to patreon.com/rcretirement and join as a patron at any support level you would prefer. And I would be most appreciative of that support. All right. So once again, thank you for being part of this audience, and I will talk to you again in our next episode. Until that time, have a wonderful day, and thank you for your service.
If you liked what you heard on today's episode, then please go below and give it a thumbs up, and be sure to subscribe to this channel. Also, please let other people know about this channel and the information it can provide for them. If you have questions or comments, then please have no qualms about posting them in the comments section below. Please remember the RC Retirement YouTube channel and the RC Retirement website are not recognized or endorsed by the Department of Defense, the Department of Veterans Affairs, or any other government agency. The information presented in these resources are for entertainment and informational purposes only. Also, the content of either of these resources should not be considered financial or legal advice. Please consult with your own legal counsel, accountant, or financial planner before making any decisions based on what you have learned here. As always, thank you for watching the RC Retirement YouTube channel.